I would love to start with a question of, have you ever imagined a digital world where everyone can participate equally? Today, we will be diving deep into the world of accessible design and exploring how to craft digital products that are empowering for everyone. So, let's start by talking about what how the digital world is expanding, and compared to this digital world, where is accessibility. We will also be talking about if there is a gap between them, and at the same time, if there is, then how should we bridge that gap. At the very end, we'll also touch on the product teams and how they can contribute for the same. But before we rush into that, let me start by introducing myself. Hi, I'm Gauri. I'm currently working as a senior UX designer at Betterworks. Today, I want to talk to you about my journey with accessibility and the person who sparked this, Heidi. While I was studying for my master's, I was also working as a part time carer, and that's where I met Heidi. She was an amazing 85-year-old woman who, for her birthday then, had received a tablet for a gift. Now imagine her excitement, a whole new way to connect to the world. But there was a hurdle. Heidi wasn't sure how to turn it on and let alone navigate it. So I started to teach her some of the basics like powering it on, setting up a video call. But the question she asked, or the challenges she faced, even to navigate through the home screen or WhatsApp or anything, they were so obvious to me before, and I never questioned them because I always thought, or maybe because of the generational difference or whatever you want to put it. But those opened my eyes to the fact that maybe web wasn't the same for everyone. But Heidi's curiosity did not stop there, and she wanted to learn more. But there was always this technological barrier between her wanting to learn and her limitations that she thought that technology had for people like her. But despite this, she had almost deep dived into the world of technology. And that inspired and transformed my master's project. And that is how I got into web accessibility at all. So let's talk about the world right now. We are going through a digital revolution where technology is not just shaping our daily lives, it's shaping how we work via remote working, it's shaping how we communicate as well as navigate with the world. As you know, the technology has also shaped our healthcare, which means that right now health technology expands lifespans. The global population is growing number day by day, which means more of the people will be in need of accessibility or will have some kind of disability at some point, whether temporary or permanent. Now, accessibility in this world has not just become a courtesy, but it's a necessity. We need to ensure that these advancements aren't leaving anyone behind. But how many of us do know what accessibility means? Often, accessibility is associated with ramps, wider doors, braille, or any physical accommodation that people with a disability need. But accessibility is so much more. Imagine having a cozy dinner with your loved ones, and everyone is gathered around a table, excited to share a meal, having a fun time. But imagine one of you have a food allergy, and but in that case, we still must try to make it work. We still try to make something delicious so that they can also enjoy with everyone, and because it's fun when you're together. The essence of accessibility is the same. It's about creating inclusive experiences that cater to diverse needs and abilities. And in this digital era, we need to understand user psychology, how they process, and how they maintain the cognitive load and react. With this, we need to design interfaces that not only empower them but are also engaging for them. So this feels frustrating, isn't it? Even feeling deceived. So imagine this unwanted moments jumping through the screen and maybe missing important information. Well, the this is the world people with disabilities have to go with in every day and every encounter. There is always lack of keyboard accessibility or maybe layout accessibility or color contrast. It was difficult, isn't it? So that's why it's important that we make sure that they see the world how we see it. So, but let's start with talking about accessibility and some of the key things that we should know about it. So, there's no one type of disability. Heidi's needs are different from what Phil might need because Phil has visual impairment. Accessible design ensures that both Heidi and Phil can access information the same way. Imagine websites which have multiple pathways to reach for the same results, like maybe descriptive images along with having a keyboard as well as a mouse navigation. So there's no one solution for it. And secondly, when we are talking about assistive technology, chances are you have already used it. Have you ever pinched your phone just to see a font or probably an image or probably a logo? Congratulations, that was assistive technology. And accessibility doesn't mean dumbing it down, but it means having alternative ways for the same result, and which everyone can use and would actually make the world more simpler. Now, when it comes to accessibility, there are also legal guidelines in many countries, which are under WCAG guidelines or under AA, AAA, or A standards, and it is legal compliance for many of the countries. But it's not just about the legal compliance; it's about creating a space for everyone and making sure that accessibility and inclusivity is present everywhere, so that the digital world is full of participation. So I think the best way to consider now is to compare where we are today. So the status of the accessibility in current world has seen a upward trend. There is more awareness, there is more roles popping up, there is user research where disabled need are being considered. But are we close? Uh, Not sure. Let's check. So, around 15% of global population lives with some kind of disability. When compared to 97% of websites still have accessibility barrier. And let's not forget the case where we know that almost an average user as well as disabled user takes around 15 seconds or less to decide if a website is user friendly, and which means not being accessible is actually losing them their insanity. And let's not forget the business case for it. People with accessibility have money to spend. So if they can't use your platform, they might go somewhere else. And there are several reasons why the gap exists. We can start by asking few of the questions to our teams or probably ourselves. Is accessibility currently a part of your process? Or is it something that is often bolted at the very end of the process? Or probably just at the very start of it? No, I have spoken about awareness, but is that awareness enough? Have you been reached out by someone in your team or probably in your company, and have they spoken about accessibility needs or making your product more accessible? Third, have you ever heard about a developer or project manager say that we will release this version once, but we do have some accessibility bug, but we'll repair that in the next version, or probably next, or probably next. So, do you think accessibility has the prioritization it should in the current world? And lastly, how many people in your organization are considered to be accessibility champion or themselves have taken up the responsibility or are specially hired for that? So these are some of the starter questions that we need to ask to understand why is there a gap. And in order to bridge this gap, we have to think about what can we do, and if it's individual or it's as a team. As a team, it's very important for us all to get on the same page so that we can connect more people like Heidi to her loved ones all around the world and not make her feel alone. So how do we bridge this gap? So the simplest thing that I would do to start from the scratch is, number one would be creating more awareness in my organization. I would start by educating myself. So, building on the foundation, as you can start learning some of the guidelines, which are very openly available in a lot of sources, including the WCAG guidelines. These are guidelines that would teach you the standard accessibility needs and some of the principles that accessibility is based on. Starting on with the one of the most important thing is to get the leadership buy-in. And to do so, what you can do is organize workshop or presentation specifically for top management, highlighting the benefit of accessibility, such as reading to a wider audience, improving the brand reputation, potentially avoiding a legal issue, and as discussed, our business case. Once the leadership is convinced, I think it would be much more easier to get all of the other teams aligned with it. To convince them or to convince other people, it's one more thing that can be done is to have empathy labs where participants can see the world from an eyes of a disabled people. The next thing that can be done is to have a diverse team. Actively seek people to include with disabilities in your team. They have lived experience that provide invaluable insights. The next thing is integrating accessibility in your core value. Once everyone understands the importance of accessibility, make it a core value. Then ensure accessibility is considered throughout the development process, to the initial launch and the final launch. So once everyone is all aware about accessibility, the next thing you can do to get them an understanding is have an empathy lab. So what is an empathy lab? As I mentioned, it is basically stepping into the shoes of a person. So this can be done via creating realistic situation by using some of the goggles or probably having to navigate through just voice recognition for a while, or maybe having plugins that can color coordinate your screens, or you can see the screens as a blind person or a color blind person would. This can also be done through AR and VR and have immersive workshops. The next important thing is to analyze a user journey. Map out the step a person would take and follow it in your product and run it through your website. One of the important thing after all of this is to measure the impact. Ask people, get some feedback, what they thought about the workshop, as well as track on the results of the workshop later and how it is affecting their team, how is it affecting their products, has there any steps been taken, or has even if their perspective has changed, anything works. Next, and one of the most important thing is to experience your own product in different situation or environment. So it's very close to the realistic simulation, but this would be actually real. For example, if you have ever worked for a delivery company or are working for one, have you ever tested your own product in the environment? Have you ever tested how a person making a delivery would experience it, probably in rain, bad weather, or probably when they can't find a house? So, I would also like to mention that this is the same concept of stimulation that I used for my own master's project. And this was inspired again from Heidi's story, because I thought the main reason that I could not understand this for so many years is because I did not see the world how she saw it. And it was important for me to see, and as a designer, to design something for people with disability by experiencing it. So that's how I made visible, and there are a lot of plugins that can help you simulate that experience. Once the awareness is done, now coming to the product teams. So when it comes to product team, what can we do about accessibility? The first step is that accessibility is a team effort, but it counts on taking ownership and having being self-reliant. So the key is to ensure that everyone is taking responsibility and is driving accessibility from different parts of the product. The second thing is about setting up a role specific training. What it means is a lot of times, because of the time frame or because of other reasons, accessibility is ignored. But how, what if we divide the goal? So for example, there are 50 guidelines in WCAG, and how about we divide some of them for just a designer role, or some of them may just apply to a developer, or some of them might just apply to a product manager. If everyone is aware of what is needed to be done, and works as an owner for that particular part, we all can help each other and make sure that something is working appropriately. And obviously you can learn more about it in your own time, but when it comes to the ownership, I think the role specific training works a lot better. And the next thing is obviously to make accessibility a part of your process, integrating it at the very start to the launch product and beyond. One of the important thing that we can do is, as an organization, have a checklist of which guidelines do we need to follow or what is the level that we need to achieve. And it has been made very easier with a lot of tech today. The last thing I would suggest is to compare. Like for example, right now we get intensify or rewarded based on how fast a product is completed or how fast the features are launched. What if we add accessibility to it, and accessibility could work on this reward system, and that would send a really strong message. The last thing, or last particular two things that we can do towards accessibility would be to do an accessibility audit to understand where we are currently. And this can be done either internally or by having the accessibility experts do it. And this has to be done by following some of the guidelines and evaluating your websites against it. So the next step is to make a public promise about having to follow or maybe to reach a level in accessibility, which can be done with crafting an accessibility statement. Your accessibility statement is a public document outlining your commitment towards your website. This might include accessibility standard that you want to follow, time frame, features, as well as a way for users to contact you, report an issue, and even suggest improvement. The very important thing is that you have to be honest about it and you have to keep the communication alive. So it might be a way that some of the things are not possible for you, or it's not about making that you would committing that you may make a perfect website. It's about giving a realistic time frame and following through it. And one of the important thing to remember is accessibility is an ongoing process. It's not an fix it all. So you always have to keep on working it. But it would be great to understand where to start from by seeing your current situation. Some of the other things that I want to cover are how the technological advancement can be used towards accessibility. So there are a lot of accessibility checkers which can analyze website and identify issues. We also have AI powered images that can generate alt text very fast, as well as advanced text to speech and voice recognition that can a lot of interpret things very easier for people now. As well as a lot of products can be integrated with AR and VR so that everyone can experience have different experiences without actually needing to make a lot of motor movements. As well as right now there are a lot of smart chatbots or virtual assistants that are being used, so integrating with that with your product can also make accessibility work. Now there are also new development like eye tracking or brain computer imaging, which might not be readily available, that but that is something that we can consider in certain situations. As designers, I would love to talk about design systems. And we know that it is key for a lot of our designs. So, if our design system is accessible, then most of our designs will be. So, for design system, the start would be the same. It would be an audit and considering where you are. But what can be done post that is you have to decide if you want to start from scratch or if you want to build in the current system. In both cases, there are a lot of open sources that you can be inspired from. For example, Lightning by Salesforce or Carbon by IBM. Both are accessible design systems that have been released and are open source and can be studied, questioned, as well as copied. So if you are a startup, you can just pick in on those system and make your brand changes. But if you want to make a certain changes in your existing design system, this can still be an inspiration. And few important things when designing a design systems are to work on continuous feedback as well as testing when it comes to accessibility. There are a lot of other resources that you can deep dive into, but this is how overall it would work. Followed up with very important, and I think this is a game changer for accessibility. So as I mentioned before, the solution that might work for Heidi might not work for Sarah, because it's not a fit for all solution. So what can be done? So probably you would have voice recognition on for Heidi, but it would make someone with some other kind of disability really confused. So having a cancel option or a option for users to decide if they want that would give the power to users and also empower them to choose what they want in their particular product. So this means that personalization for accessibility would give users an option to customize your product according to their needs. And AI works on personalization a lot, which means we can use it to 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 personalize our product and give users what they need. This can include font sizes, color schemes, keyboard navigation, and even text to speech settings. The next thing is optimizing the digital experiences by creating individual needs, which means that the essence of accessibility can be transformed into personalization so that we don't dumb it down but we give more options. And lastly, I would ask you to look around and see if there are, and question things, if there are accessibility needs around you. For example, I think I've seen a lot of menus being handled in the form of a scan code, or a lot of hotels have, or canteens or cafeterias have a scan code where you can scan and then see the menu. Has anyone considered accessibility for someone who is not visually impaired or cannot see properly? So how would they use the menu? So there might be solution in some of the place, but are the solution for all of the places where this scan code mechanism works? And if so, think about it. Would you like to wait for your food to be delivered, or just cluelessly wait somewhere so that anyone would reach out to you? And I would just like to ask if there are any questions at this point.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Gary. That was really interesting. I love the kind of QR code example because it caught me out as well.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, I was questioning it the same thing. And I was like, yeah, what would happen if someone did that to me?
Exactly. Um, I have a question because one of the things I've really struggled with when I've tried to kind of go down the accessibility, or not go down the accessibility road, that's the wrong word, but trying to improve the accessibility of the products that I've worked on, there's always this tension with just get it out the door and that kind of Pareto principle, 80-20. So as you said, there are 15% of people who have disabilities, but to a company, they'd be like, well, we'll get it out for the 80%. So how do you argue, or how do you kind of counter that push to just get something out and spend less time on it instead of getting something that's accessible and for everybody?
Yeah, that's actually something that I have been asked so many times. Even in a lot of times, I mentioned that I have a passion for accessibility, and a lot of time, even in interviews, they get back saying, "But we wanna also work on the profits," which makes sense. So I, I would start for some of the audience by talking about what is the business case for it. And a lot of times when they actually look into it, it's not the 80%, it's about just 60% of their audience would do not need accessibility, but the rest of them do. So that's where their business case is. But it's not just about the business case, it's more than that. When it comes to people who really talk about this are someone who are not really aware. So I would also talk about how their brand reputation looks, how their product would be perceived in future, because a lot of time people who are consuming their product right now might need the same product later on, and they might have the disability needs then. Right now there's also a very woke culture around accessibility, as same as the other some of the other things. So a lot of things affect brand right now, so we can leverage that and convince a lot of people. I think the best thing that you can do is make them use the web how it might look, and their own product how it might look to people with disabilities. And I think that should work very well.
Excellent. So yeah, if anybody wants to ask any questions, please feel free to write them in and I'll ask those questions to Gary. There's another one that just kind of came to mind because I always think about technical debt. and the way technical debt grows in a product, not by anybody being kind of intentionally bad, but just because if you don't pay enough attention. So you might do an audit for accessibility and you get really good, but then over time that will degrade, just like every other part of technical debt. So is there anything that you can do to kind of try to keep it top of mind? I know you mentioned make it part of the job, but what I've seen in the same way of technical debt, it's part of people's job to write clean code, and yet they don't. So what are some tips that people can do to make sure that they stay on top of accessibility?
So I think there are a couple of things. One would obviously be make it a part of your core values, because companies always do come back to their core values. But more than it, and once suppose you have done the accessibility audit and you have come clean, which is a rare case, but if you do, so you also have to understand that technology is an ever changing thing, which means people's needs as well as the product needs are changing. So what can be done is have a regular audit, or have a testing session that is scheduled for particular times in a year, or probably in different quarters. So that would also point it out, but also keeping an open ear to people, like having a page just dedicated for them to get back or report some of the issues, because I think at least users' voice would be heard in that way, and then it would be a top priority then.
Brilliant. Well, that actually brings us to time. So I just want to thank you once again, Gary, for sharing your accessibility story. I really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody out there did as well.
Thank you.